So, this is the prince's newest plaything. This is the one everyone thinks so much of. I wonder if Andre played a joke when he called to say you were coming. You look ragged and soft, like a child's juguete.
You don't look like you belong here, Holmes. New customer. Little confused about how this works. Or maybe you're here to start some shit. Either way, you pissed off the wrong chingon.
Child, you were born into this world retching with original sin, fallen. By your hands, our brothers have suffered greatly. But Hazel has a plan for all that seek his absolution. Perhaps this fall was a blessing. Fallen now, you have a chance to rise again amongst our ranks.
Do you sometimes wonder what it would be like to be anemic, a cannibal, and a cartel enforcer all at once? Would you prefer your boss were literal human skin instead of Armani? Or maybe you're like me and have ever looked upon one of those greasy, disheveled shovelheads and thought, hey, he's just like me. Whatever the case, I've got just a mod for you.
Maybe I can help you find whatever it is you're looking for.
Okay, so you've likely heard of this game. Your dad has probably heard of this game. In fact, there's a decent chance your dad recommended this game to you once. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines has been rooted in the atrophied minds of nostalgic millennials to the point of symbiosis, and much like other millennial source engine jank, it's become exceptionally difficult to find someone who isn't already familiar with the game. So you may be asking, why is this idiot making a video about a game that everyone and their dog has already played a million times? Well, I'm not planning to reheat this stale old soup once more, and I'm not gonna talk about the base game much. Instead, I want to talk about a mod for this game that has probably significantly contributed to setting the standard for story mods. May I introduce you to Clanquist Mod by Burgermeister.
You're probably like most people, ain't you, pal? You got certain desires and fantasies, things you wouldn't want your wife or your girlfriend to know about.
Now, there have been mods that were of a small scale but still excellent, as well as ambitious disasters. Clanquist Mod, however, is neither of these. It started out small and unremarkable with a few new additions here and there and basically delivered exactly what it said. Clan-specific quests that range from pretty decent like the Madness-Induced Dream for the Tremere to the miserable slugfest that was a Gangrel quest. But the mod really grew into its own when it added two new features with the 4.0 update that elevated it exponentially. One being the ability to commit diablerie, the other, the real meat and potatoes of this mod, an entirely new Sabbat storyline branching off of the main story. Now, you probably already played this game and I don't need to explain what any of these words mean, but I'm gonna clarify a few terms just in case. If this bores you, skip to here.
This again?
Vampire the Masquerade is about a secretive group of supernatural parasites that shun sunlight and manipulate the entire world behind the scenes in a pyramid scheme that reaches all the way up to God. While this might sound like a post from a Korean basket weaving forum, we're actually talking about, right, vampires. Being a vampire in this setting is a pretty bad deal. You become tougher and get a bunch of cool new powers, but in return you're employed to the worst kind of black company for the rest of your unlife. There's no overtime pay, no saying no to your boss, no promotions, and no vacation. If you're working for the Camarilla, that is. See, vampires largely organized into three distinct sects who all variously at war with each other, the biggest one being the Camarilla. There's also the Anarchs, who like to pretend they're offering much more freedom and equal standing to their members, with varying degrees of truth to that claim. And then there's the Sabbat, who kinda pretend to be like the Anarchs but way edgier. You can kinda think of the Sabbat as some kind of raw classical black metal as opposed to the Anarchs' big label punk rock and the Camarilla's elevator tune.
The Sabbat are just as bad as the Camarilla. Worse, maybe? I get we're monsters or whatever, but dudes really just need to chill the fuck out. Keep your distance from these fucks. They might just convince you they have real answers.
Okay, but what is diablerie? Basically, a vampire's generation determines his power ceiling, and normally there's no way to raise it, except by drinking the blood of more powerful vampires. It is a kind of vampire cannibalism that is almost universally condemned, primarily because it's the one thing that threatens the rigid power structure of the Camarilla. While that's the gist of it, there's much more to it, but we'll get to that eventually.
When anyone breaks these laws, they undermine the well-worn fabric of our centuries-old society. Understand my predicament.
VtMB, being an old source engine game, does not exactly impress with its combat and gameplay. Instead, it is the writing, characters, and atmosphere that keeps players coming back every year.
Do you know when the next eye harvest is, by chance?
Almost the entire game is quotable front to back, though not all characters are equal in that regard. See, VtMB is home to a phenomenon that I call the law of charismatic balding, a general trend where the amount of hair a character has is inversely proportional to their likability and charm. At the bottom, we have absolutely insufferable reprobates like Beckett, who is without a doubt the original author of the infamous atheist Reddit post.
All this speculation about the sarcophagus containing an antediluvian and being a portent of Gehenna is making me cringe. These are the kinds of ridiculous, superstitious assumptions I came here to debunk.
Conversely, there's Maximilian Strauss, the wizard, who single-handedly saved the trenchcoats and shade strip from being utterly cringe. And of course, at the very top, the legend, my man, the smut dealer Flynn, a lovable rogue stealing hearts left and right since 2004.
Depraved ain't a four-letter word here. You know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't. With such a colorful cast of insanely well-written and voice-acted characters, how could Clanquist Mod possibly compete? Quite formidably, as it turns out.
The Mac isn't gonna look too closely at what gets you hot and bothered. But as long as you got the money, you always leave satisfied.
Clanquist Mod, for the most part, plays exactly like the base game. You start out picking your race clan, as always, and while Ventru is objectively the best clan, I decided to go with Tremere for this video, as the mod has some special dialogue for Tremere characters. Up until Hollywood, there isn't much in terms of new content, and what is there is barely worth mentioning. By this point, however, an astute player might have become frustrated with vampire politicking, being yanked around by literally every character and faction they come across.
Come on, fledgling, don't ever think you're ahead of the ball in this game.
Never rising above being a complacent little wage slave, destined to fade into the masses of brain-dead normies sucking the fluoride and microplastics right out of their second-hand used blood bags. You might be thinking that if you simply put in the work, show up early and leave late, you'll eventually make it and rise up in the ranks. But this ain't your silly little boomer fantasy, friend. This is real life, where conscientiousness, diligence, and hard work only ever gets rewarded with more work. What's that? You did overtime 100 days in a row? Enjoy your single extra day of unpaid vacation and complimentary pizza, fool. However, it is when we meet Andre the Samisi that we get to make a monumental decision that could radically alter the rest of the playthrough.
Tell me, child, are you scared?
Do we continue our deplorable existence as domesticated end consumers of polite vampire society slop? Or do we rise to the occasion and say no to the neurotic middle manager control freak LaCroix, no to the ineffectual union leader Nines, and liberate ourselves on the path to greatness? Because this is the face of freedom.
Oh, okay. I'll just go back into the pleasure palace.
Deciding that we would rather trust a man who turns literal human anuses into docile guard dogs, we of course join up with the Sabbat, which incidentally provides the perfect occasion to showcase one of the biggest strengths of this mod. You see, at some points, Burgermeister had to voice additional dialogue that he wrote for vanilla characters such as Andre, and actually went out of his way to acquire actors who could accurately mimic the original voice acting. I'm gonna let the results speak for themselves.
I see the weariness in your eyes. You grow tired of the yoke the dusty elders of the Camarilla have thrown on your back. You are different. Born outside their rigid hierarchy, you have an opportunity to ascend to darker, more powerful magics. To serve yourself, rather than the blood of your elders. But the history of your forefathers is tainted.
Need I say more? Andre directs us to join up with the rest of the Sabbat, for which Burgermeister actually provided an entirely new hub. You remember the hub worlds of VtMB, right? The strangely cozy misery of Santa Monica, the intimidating and oppressive skyscrapers and back streets of downtown, the laid-back ambience of Hollywood that hints at something utterly monstrous hiding beneath the surface. And Chinatown. Now where do you think the Sabbat would make their home? Who would shelter the most cruel, bloodthirsty, violent, degenerate and deplorable gaggle of vampire scum the earth has ever seen? Now don't take this from me, take it from the mod. But the answer is immigrants. Turns out the Sabbat feel most at home among the public housing of LA's foreign-born population. Just what did Burgermeister mean by this? If you join the Sabbat, you even get to move into the projects. It's not much, but it comes with a built-in kitchen, a TV, access to your local vampire-controlled drug cartel, a Sombra fancy man, Walkavian preacher for your spiritual needs, and best of all, government funding.
You're well outside the domain of the Camarilla now, and their rules. There's no sheriff. The only justice we have is of the street.
Now that we're here, let me introduce you to the crew. The two biggest players in the area are Victoria, the Setite drug kingpin.
Name's Victoria. But until you earn a place in the Sabbat, Lick, you call me Ductus.
And Hazel Tomes, the Walkavian preacher.
I'll put this simply. I lead the weak, the weary, and the woe-begotten to a place of pride. To this place.
In order to progress, we will have to join one of their packs. If being a cartel enforcer and drug pusher is more your thing, you might want to consider Victoria. Her heritage, by which I mean her clan, predisposes her towards enabling vice and a dependency on narcotics, and like it or not, you will have to take part in her schemes. But if you're not a materialist reprobate and seek a higher calling, you might be drawn towards Hazel Tomes instead. Said higher calling turns out to be Hazel Tomes himself. The entire world of Hazel Tomes consists of Hazel Tomes, and so will yours if you join him in his endeavor to make the world a better place. A place that is more like Hazel Tomes.
You doubt the glory of Hazel Tomes, you fool!
There's also the Mac, a shady La Sombra pimp who runs a kind of brothel for the vampire elect. And while the mod tries really hard to make him hateable, his voice actor simply did too good a job to make me dislike him.
Hazel? Yeah. Fucking Malkavian. He's as whacked out as they come. Now he's coming around here, wanting me to back him while he vies for bishop of this corner of LA.
This man does have a certain charisma, and I was kinda disappointed joining his pack was not an option.
Yeah, well, you know how it is, Hazel. I don't want to get involved in the politics here. I'm only around long enough to turn a buck and get back on my feet.
So much for the Sabbat, but what about diablerie? Once you join the Sabbat, you get the option to cannibalize almost every major vampire NPC in the game, be it Jeanette, Isaac, or Ash. However, this is no $10 Chinese buffet. You gotta treat diablerie like a chef, picking only the choicest cuts and freshest ingredients. Because diablerie does not come without risks. Much like in real life, cannibalizing another man will not only grant you their powers, but will actually merge their consciousness with yours. And if you fail to pacify them, they might just run rampant in your very soul. So if you're not careful about what you put in your mouth, you might just suffer side effects like frequent bouts of severe schizophrenia and mood swings. Again, much like in real life, just because you can consume your fellow man's flesh, blood and soul doesn't necessarily mean you should, even if the benefits are hard to ignore.
It is time to take what is rightfully ours from the Asian devils.
Clancrus mod makes excellent use of the background lore of the Sabbat, and if you're concerned about lore friendliness, then let me assuage your fears. Burgermeister evidently knows his stuff, and took great care implementing even minor lore details in such a way that it seems entirely natural. I cannot reveal much without spoiling anything, but rest assured, the Sabbat experience isn't just one of wanton cruelty and monstrous savagery, but also one of authenticity. A fair warning though, since, as you might have guessed, being Sabbat is not for the faint of heart. No matter how hard you resist, your unlife will surely be one of ever-escalating violence and cruelty, and you will be trapped in a dehumanizing maelstrom that will taint you to your very core.
Let's see if you can stomach running with us down here in the filth.
And keep in mind that making an enemy out of all but one of the biggest factions in the game might just have unintended consequences. But if you actually succeed in taking over LA for the Sabbat, the city will surely be in for years of great evil, monstrosity, and bloodshed. But what will be even greater is your sense of accomplishment.
You are a grave disappointment.
Now for all the praise I have for this mod, it is not without its flaws. Not all the new dialogue is voice acted for one thing, which can be kinda jarring at times. The endgame pacing is completely off the rails as you're rushed from one event to another. There is a fairly cool boss rush section that kinda makes up for it though. Also, with Source Engine being a million years old by now, and VtMB being a buggy, unstable jankfest to begin with, installing such a massive mod on top is akin to slapping a magnet onto a barely functioning pacemaker.
大好きで。
But regardless of its flaws, Clancrest mod deserves your attention. When you once again feel that periodic itch to reinstall VtMB, I highly recommend you give it a try. It will freshen up your experience of the game like nothing else.
Would have been a welcomed apprentice. You could have enjoyed the pyramid's resources and prestige, power, knowledge, influence. But instead, you've thrown it all away.
Even in the abyss, you won't escape the politics and bickering. Not so long as you live among your fellow Canaanites here in the Angel's City. Worship the dollar at your altar of inequities, but it won't buy you salvation on Gehenna's Eve. You say you believe in our father's shackles.
You betrayed us all. I gave you guidance, responsibility, opportunity, power, and you sold us out to the Sabbat.
That is all for today. Thanks for watching.
I don't think so, buddy.